never thought my 17th birthday would become the kind of night people would whisper about for years. If you had asked me back then, I would have told you I was just another face in the hallway, invisible, quiet, ordinary. But what happened that night changed everything. It's the reason I'm sitting here now, trying to piece together how a simple idea spiraled into chaos. My name is Thomas. I lived in a quiet suburb where the biggest excitement was when the mail arrived late. Identical houses, trimmed lawns, neighbors who knew far too much about each other. It was safe, it was predictable, and to a kid like me, it was suffocating. Then there was Costa, my best friend. He was everything I wasn't: loud, fearless, shamelessly confident. He could talk his way into or out of anything. Where I hesitated, he charged forward. Where I stayed silent, he filled the room with noise. And then there was JB, our third musketeer. Steady, loyal, the glue that kept us from falling apart. 2 weeks before my birthday, Costa threw out an idea that sounded insane at first. "Dude," he said, "this year we don't do cake and candles. We go big. I'm talking about a party that no one will ever forget." I laughed nervously. "At my place? You're kidding." He smirked like he was already picturing it. "Your parents are leaving for the weekend, right? Perfect opportunity. Don't worry. We'll keep it under control." That word, control, would haunt me later. But at the time, I didn't realize how quickly things could spiral. At first, I tried to brush him off, but Costa wasn't the kind of guy you could ignore. Every day he hyped it up, inviting people, spreading rumors at school. "It's gonna be legendary," he kept saying. And slowly, against my better judgment, I started to believe him. The setup. The day of my birthday, the three of us spent hours preparing the house. We pushed furniture against the walls, hid anything valuable, stocked the kitchen with snacks and drinks. Costa acted like a general preparing for battle. "This is it, man," he grinned. "Tonight you're not invisible. Tonight, you're the king." I tried to smile, but inside I was restless. My parents had said, "We trust you, Thomas. Don't let us down." And I was about to risk that trust for something I wasn't even sure I wanted. As the sun set, I stood in front of the mirror, fixing my shirt. My heart was pounding. I told myself it was just a small gathering, a few friends, nothing crazy. I had no idea what was about to come. The first knock. The doorbell rang. My chest tightened. I opened the door to find two guys from school, kids I barely knew, holding party bags. "Happy birthday, man," they said, stepping inside like they owned the place. Then another group arrived. Then another. Within minutes, the house began to fill. Music echoed through the halls. Laughter bounced off the walls. I moved through the crowd like a stranger in my own home. People I'd only seen from a distance were now patting me on the back, calling me by name, congratulating me. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. Costa was in his element. He darted from room to room, cracking jokes, pumping up the energy, hyping everyone. JB stayed close, giving me reassuring looks whenever I seemed overwhelmed, a shift in the air. But as the night went on, something shifted. The number of guests kept growing, cars lined the street outside, voices and music spilled into the neighborhood. I stepped into the backyard and froze. Dozens of kids were already there, some dancing, some diving into the pool fully clothed. Lights glowed overhead, casting everything in a surreal glow. It hit me then. This wasn't just a party. It was something else. Something bigger than me, bigger than Costa, bigger than the house itself. The laughter, the music, the chaos. It was intoxicating. For the first time, I felt alive, noticed, important. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a knot of dread was tightening. This wasn't going to stay under control. This was only the beginning. Noise has a way of taking over. At first, it's just music in the background, then voices rising over it. But eventually, it becomes a living thing, pounding in your chest, vibrating through the walls, pushing you forward whether you want it or not. That's what my house felt like that night. Alive, restless, hungry. By 9 o'clock, the place was packed. The living room looked like a concert. The kitchen was overflowing. The backyard had turned into a carnival. People were everywhere. Faces I barely knew, seniors from other schools, even strangers who had clearly just followed the noise. I tried to move through the house, but it was like swimming against a current. Everyone shouted, laughed, clinked cups together. The smell of sweat, perfume, and smoke hung heavy in the air. My heart kept asking the same question. How did this happen so fast? A stranger in my own home. At first, I told myself it was fine. This was what Costa promised, right? Attention, popularity. For one night, I was the center of the universe. People called my name, cheered when I passed, snapped photos with me. But then I saw kids upstairs, in my parents' bedroom, in my little sister's room, rummaging through drawers, jumping on beds, rifling through closets. My pulse spiked. "This isn't okay," I muttered. I found Costa in the hallway, grinning ear to ear. "We're legends, man," he shouted over the music. "They're tearing the place apart," I snapped back. He just laughed and slapped my shoulder. "Relax, it's under control." That word again. Control. I didn't believe it anymore. The current pulls stronger. The night blurred into fragments. A flash of strobe lights in the backyard. Someone cannonballing into the pool in jeans. A guy climbing onto the roof, yelling like a king. The more I looked, the more I realized people weren't here to celebrate me. They were here to destroy the silence of suburbia, to break every rule, to go as far as they possibly could. And I was the excuse. Trouble on the horizon. Then came the first warning. Red and blue lights flickered across the street. Police. For a split second, the crowd froze. A wave of whispers ran through the house. Cops. They're shutting it down. I felt my chest cave in. This was it. The end. But then Costa, insane as always, walked straight out the front door. I watched him approach the officers with his ridiculous confidence, hands spread wide like he was welcoming them to the party. I couldn't hear what he said over the bass thundering through the walls, but somehow, impossibly, after a few minutes the officers got back in their cars and drove away. The crowd erupted in cheers. Costa raised his arms like a victorious gladiator. People chanted his name, but I didn't cheer. My stomach twisted tighter. The cops leaving wasn't a win. It was a sign. A warning ignored. And I knew what came next would be worse. A frenzy. With the police gone, the energy spiked. People thought they were untouchable. Windows cracked, furniture toppled, glass shattered. The noise grew so loud I could feel it in my teeth. I pushed through the crowd, shouting for people to calm down, to get off the roof, to stop climbing the trees in the yard. Nobody listened. Nobody even looked at me. I wasn't the king of this night. I wasn't even a participant. I was a hostage. Sparks. Then came the fireworks. Literally, someone dragged a box of them into the backyard, and before I could react, they lit one. A blast shot into the sky, showering sparks over the crowd. People screamed and cheered. Another one went off, then another. The air filled with smoke and light. I coughed, waving it away, panic setting in. "This is insane," I shouted at Costa. "Relax, bro. Everyone's having the time of their lives." He grinned, his eyes glowing with the reflection of sparks. But all I could see was the danger, the sparks landing on the dry grass, the crowd pressing tighter and tighter, the way everything felt one mistake away from disaster. And deep down, I knew we had already crossed the line. There was no pulling back now. This wasn't just a party anymore. It was a fuse. and it was already lit. By the time midnight hit, my house wasn't a house anymore. It was a storm. Walls rattled with bass. The floor trembled beneath pounding feet. The air was thick with smoke, sweat, and the sharp sting of something burning. Every room was filled, every hallway crammed. Kids shouted, laughed, fought, kissed. It was like the world had cracked open, spilling all its secrets into my living room. And I was stuck in the middle, choking on the realization this wasn't fun anymore. This was a disaster unraveling in real time. Blue and red. The first time the cops showed up, Costa had somehow smooth-talked them away, but luck like that doesn't last forever. The second time, there weren't just 2 officers. There were multiple cars, lights flashing, sirens slicing through the night. The neighbors were out on their lawns, pointing, yelling, recording everything on their phones. The crowd inside saw the flashing lights and panicked. Some bolted for the back fence. Others pressed against the windows, trying to see what was happening. The music roared on like it was mocking me. This time I knew the cops weren't going to shrug it off. But before they could even make it to the front door, something happened that pushed everything past the point of no return. Fire. Someone, I never saw who, had brought something insane. Not fireworks, not sparklers, a flamethrower. I remember the crowd chanting, cheering as the first blast of fire tore through the night sky. It lit up the yard in a blaze of orange, brighter than the street lamps. People screamed, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement, pure, reckless madness. I stood frozen, watching tongues of fire lick the branches of a tree. In seconds, the leaves ignited. Flames raced upward, then leapt to the wooden fence. The crowd roared louder. Phones were out, recording, capturing the madness. But all I could see was my home, my parents' home, starting to burn, collapse. "Turn it off!" I shouted, shoving through the crowd. "Stop this!" No one listened. The music drowned me out. The chaos swallowed me whole. Costa finally pushed his way toward me. His grin had cracked. For the first time that night, I saw panic in his eyes. "Maybe we should," he started, but the sentence died in his throat when part of the roof caught. The flames had spread. The roof of my house, was glowing, then bursting into fire. That was it. The fuse had reached the dynamite. Panic. The crowd flipped in an instant. Cheers turned to screams. People shoved past each other, desperate to get out. Some leapt fences. Some tried to cram into cars, slamming into bumpers, honking horns. The street was a maze of headlights and sirens. Police shouted commands. Firefighters dragged hoses toward the house, but the flames were faster. The roof sagged, timbers collapsing, sparks spraying across the yard. I just stood there, paralyzed, as the life I knew crumbled in front of me. The home I'd grown up in was being devoured, and it was my fault. The end of the party glass shattered. Beams groaned. Smoke billowed black against the night sky. Neighbors screamed at us to get out, to move back. People scattered like insects when the lights come on. And I, the birthday boy, the so-called king of the night, just stood among the ashes, staring as everything I thought I controlled went up in flames. Costa found me again. His usual cocky voice was gone. "Bro," he said, his face pale in the firelight. "I didn't think it would. I cut him off. It doesn't matter anymore." Because by then, it didn't. The damage was done. The party was over, and so was everything else. The fire burned long into the night. By the time the last flames were put out, the house was unrecognizable. Charred beams jutted into the sky like broken teeth. Windows were gone, walls blackened, the roof caved in. My safe little suburban home, the place where I'd spent my whole childhood, was nothing but wreckage. I stood behind the police tape, wrapped in a blanket someone had thrown over my shoulders. The flashing lights of fire trucks and squad cars painted the street red and blue. Neighbors whispered in clusters, staring at me with pity, disgust, or both. The party was gone. The crowd had scattered into the night, leaving only smoke, sirens, and silence. And me, silence after noise. For hours, the house had been alive with noise, heat, chaos, but now there was nothing. Only the hiss of water spraying smoldering ruins and the low hum of engines. It felt wrong, unnatural. The quiet was heavier than the chaos. It pressed down on me, suffocating, leaving me alone with the truth. I had wanted to be seen, to matter, and now everyone in the city would remember my name, not because I was special, but because I had burned everything down. The call sometime after 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed. My parents. I didn't answer. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? Happy birthday. I destroyed the house. Hope the trip was nice. The truth would be waiting for them the moment they pulled into the street. Faces in the ash. Costa and JB sat on the curb nearby, looking nothing like the kings they'd imagined themselves to be. Costa stared at the ground, silent for once. JB rubbed his hands over his face, muttering prayers under his breath. We didn't talk much. There was nothing left to say. The night had started with promises of glory, of being remembered, of stepping out of the shadows, and it had ended with us sitting in ashes, broken pieces of who we thought we were scattered around us. The walk home. When the police finally let us go, I walked down the empty street, blankets still draped over my shoulders, my shoes crunched on bits of glass. The neighborhood was quiet, but I could feel eyes watching from behind curtains. I didn't belong here anymore. I wasn't Invisible Thomas, the quiet kid next door. I was the boy who destroyed everything. And the worst part? Some small, twisted part of me knew Costa was right. People wouldn't forget this night. I wouldn't be invisible again. Ever. But at what cost? Morning. The sun came up hours later, painting the wreckage gold. Smoke still drifted from the ruins, curling into the sky. The news vans had arrived by then, cameras rolling, reporters eager to turn my nightmare into a headline. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at what used to be my home. The place I'd laughed, argued, grown. Now it was rubble, and it was all because I wanted to feel like I mattered. Costa tried to crack a joke, his voice hoarse, but it fell flat. Even he couldn't find words to spin this into something good. There was no spin, no excuse, only consequences. The end of it all. When my parents finally returned, their faces told me everything. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief. I tried to speak, but the words died before they left my throat. Because what could I possibly say? Nothing would undo it. Nothing would bring back the walls, the roof, the trust. Nothing would erase the fact that I had let it happen. I had wanted one night to change everything, and it had, just not the way I imagined.